to Regulated and Relational, a bi-monthly podcast brought to you by the Attachment and Trauma Network. Today, Julie and Ginger sit down with Dr. Melissa Merrick to explore the evolving landscape of child well-being and what it takes to move from awareness to true prevention. Let's join them.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Regulated and Relational, our podcast produced by the Attachment and Trauma Network. I'm Julie Bean.
And I'm Ginger Healy.
And we are excited to share with you from both our personal experiences and our professional knowledge what it truly means to be attachment-focused, trauma-informed, and how we can help children impacted by early childhood trauma. Today, we have an amazing expert guest in our studio, and we can't wait for you to meet her. Ginger, tell everyone about Dr. Melissa Merrick.
Oh, I can't wait to. I've been so excited about this, and Dr. Merrick is a hero of mine. I'm going to try to remain professional here and not fangirl out too much, but you'll see that I just hold you in such high regard, Dr. Merrick. Melissa T. Merrick, PhD, is President and CEO of Prevent Child Abuse America, PCA America, the nation's oldest and largest nonprofit organization dedicated to the primary prevention of child abuse and neglect. She has more than 20 years of clinical research and leadership experience related to the etiology, course, and prevention of child abuse and neglect. She's recognized as one of the country's foremost experts on adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, and she served for 8 years as the lead scientist for the ACEs study at CDC. She's the lead author of CDC Vital Signs, ACEs, the most nationally representative report on the topic. And she's one of the principal architects of Thriving Families, Safer Children, and National Commitment to Wellbeing, which is an effort that aims to reshape child welfare in the United States by focusing explicitly on equity and prevention. A few months ago, I was in Utah, where I live, and I was headed to a conference where Nadine Burke-Harris was the keynote. And of course, you know, Nadine is a hero of mine. And so I got there extra early, but I got lost trying to figure out which door to go in and ended up like on the other side of the building at a random back door. And there were two women standing there that I thought, oh, they'll open the door for me and maybe they'll know where to direct me to go. And so I got up there and I said, can I go through this door? And I looked right at this woman and I was like, you're Melissa Merrick? And you said, yes. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I was embarrassed. And I walked through and went through registration and sat down and looked at the time. And I had a lot of extra time. And I went, maybe this gives me enough time to go back and introduce myself to Dr. Merrick and, you know, have a conversation. Do I dare do that? So I walked all the way back to that spot at the other end of the building and introduced myself and met you and Malia, and sheepishly was like, can I get a picture? I mean, I was ridiculously fangirling and just got brave enough to say, hey, would you want to be on our podcast? Because that was a dream of mine. So here we are. This is like a really cool full circle moment of meeting you and being here. So thank you and welcome. I'm just so happy that you're here.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I just love that story that you just retold because that's really how it happened. And I was sort of like in Utah, incognito. No one knew I was coming. And someone just like, are you Melissa Merrick? I'm like, how does anyone in Utah know who I am? Anyway, you have really great energy, Ginger. And I was excited to learn about the work you all do, and certainly always excited to join other partners in this work. Because this is, you know, certainly my life's work, likely your all's life's work. And of course, to the listeners and viewers today, it takes all of us, right? We want to create conditions for thriving and prosperity and innovation and being a mom myself to my two kids. I have my son, my baby just turned 14 yesterday. So his
Wow.
brain is, 14. Not
Yeah.
It's about food, fun, and friends, and all
Yeah.
things basketball. He's about to go to high school, and my daughter is a
Fun.
rising junior, and she's
Oh.
really 33 at her core. So brain is also 16, but
Mhm.
it's just
Mhm.
been such a wonderful journey of mommyhood. And when I think about, all parents just doing the very best we can do in a time right now that's pretty stressful.
Yes.
Certainly parenting during a pandemic a few years ago, super stressful. We learned a lot of things about how we have to hold multiple truths. I feel like the same is a parent in this time, where you can be really navigating well and also very aware of the complexity of the moment and the stressors on all families. And
Mhm.
so, anyway, coming together in conversation and partnership and with a lot of laughter, I think is sort of the recipe.
Awesome.
Amen to all of that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We're so happy to have you here because you are singing our song, and
Yep.
we tell people with a smile on our face that we're all trauma all the time, which is not really, not necessarily true, because we have to have the hope, but the truth is it's a big enough topic and a big enough area of need and concern that we are all needed. I would love, because we always love this with our guests, to hear about what brought you to this work, like how you ended up where you are with Prevent Child Abuse America.
Yeah, I love that question. And, I summarize it in this way. I basically listen to the universe. And, because I'm somewhere where I don't think I could have predicted
Mm.
exactly how it would go. I've always been interested in children and families. And so, as an undergraduate student in Philadelphia, worked a lot with foster children and saw a lot of hope, actually, hope and resilience in that population. I didn't know it was called resilience at that
Mhm.
time, right? Still learning. And then I did some volunteer work as a court appointed special advocate in DC while I was working on a fellowship at NIH. And I was like in a memory lab. So I was, what kinds of questions could you ask young children to elicit accurate details about child physical abuse? So that was sort of that. And then I applied to graduate school. So I'm trained as a child clinical psychologist. So again, really used to helping families in moments of crisis, really helping them heal and thrive after adversity. And really, I was on postdoc in Miami at the University of Miami Medical School, working in a child protection team. And so my job at that time was really to um, make sure kids were safe to return to home after a crisis. But that coincided for me with becoming a mom myself. So probably hormones contributed to this, but it was also just this real palpable sense that I was seeing families in crisis and
Mhm.
had the multiple systems that had touched these families, given them support on the front end. Maybe they would have never come into my office, and it was one day in particular that I saw a young family, and they had a child that was my Lily, my daughter's age, 9 months old. So again, post, partum hormones and all of that. I cried in session, something you should probably not do as a clinician, but we're people, we're human, right? And it was really compelling that these parents were trying the very best they could do. Mom had 2 or 3 jobs, dad had 2 or 3 jobs. They didn't speak English, they had no family in Miami, they didn't have reliable transportation. So again, all these stressors
Right.
on them, right? And so of course, this family was in crisis, and the child had pattern bruising on their bodies and such. But it was really like we could blame and shame this family,
Mhm.
as we do in
Mhm.
this country.
Yes.
um, uh, or we could realize what were all of the things that every one of us, all the different professionals that had come into this family's lives, all the neighbors, all the just community members, how could we have met this moment on the front end? And so I remember really starkly that day going home and telling my husband, like, for my own mental health, I don't think I can continue to do this work after the fact. I think I need to
Mhm.
be in the business of helping families on the front end. And so the universe became apparent. I got a call from the CDC had not applied to a job. It was, but they were
Wow.
looking for a child abuse expert to do etiology and surveillance. So I quickly went to Google, what's etiology? What's surveillance? Oh, risk and protective factors, assessment, putting it in my lingo. I could do that. And anyway, off we moved a couple months later to CDC, where I really learned about public health on the job. Once you learn about public health, and that is like what all of us as a society can do collectively to assure the conditions in which all people can thrive and be healthy, I can't go back to just helping one family at a time. It's
Yeah.
sort of this idea that when I pass, or we collectively pass one big policy, right, it can help millions of families take that load off. That will never come into my program, right, or to my office. This is not to say clinical work and treatment is not a critical part of a prevention continuum. Indeed, it is. But the work of primary prevention is really, how do we stem the flow of children and families that touch deeper end systems and need clinical intervention or even healthcare, right? Certainly stemming the flow of children that go to child welfare or juvenile justice, that kind of thing. So how do we support families on the front end to be whole and thriving? And so I worked at CDC for about 10 years, built that public health muscle, and listened to the universe a second time. I hope this is the last time for a while. I was giving a talk at Prevent Child Abuse North Carolina. They now have a new name, Positive Childhood Alliance North Carolina, but our PCA chapter in North Carolina. And I was giving a keynote along with one of my heroes, Dr. Bruce Perry, a neuroscientist in this area of childhood trauma. I know he was just at one of your meetings giving a keynote as well. And he's going to be at our national conference in a couple of weeks in Portland. But we shared a lift to the airport. Both of our flights were delayed, so we talked all about the work and nothing about a job. And it was 2 hours into our conversation, he's like, "I think I know the next job for you." And I said, "Oh, thank you, but I have a good job." And anyway, he's like, "Just talk to us." And it really was a very life-changing, career-changing opportunity for me to join this organization, that a 52-year-old organization, national nonprofit. We have state chapters around the country. We have an evidence-based home visiting model, Healthy Families America, that's in 600 sites around the country. We've helped over 1 million families in that program since its inception. And we do a lot of policy and advocacy. We do a lot of raising awareness, but not of the problem of child abuse and neglect, but of the prevention solutions. And so anyway, here I am, nonprofit CEO in training, 6 years in. I've learned a lot. I'm learning all the time, but that's a little bit about my trajectory. And so still helping to support families to be well and thriving, just doing it in a really comprehensive front end way. With a public health approach.
That's amazing. No, and so important. And I've been an admirer. I've been an admirer here in Georgia, obviously, of the history of ACEs and the CDC work, but also the Positive Childhood Alliance, the way that has transformed from being, from being super prevention language to the much broader prevent, what I mean? You obviously do that because that was part of what you and the team have orchestrated, but it's a good move to really reach farther out into society, I think.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting because prevention, I think a lot of people still don't know what it is, right? It's hard to operationalize. What do we mean by prevention? In fact, I read legislation all the time and it's really focused on treatment, but they put the word prevention as if that makes a big difference. So really, I think this appetite for trying to come up with language that people can wrap their brains around, positive childhood experiences, buffers, what are the conditions for health, well-being, and thriving. All of that, I think, is trying to operationalize what prevention is, right? Because prevention is possible, but we can only do it in partnership. There's a long prevention continuum, right, where I would encompass clinical intervention and treatment still as an important, again, critical piece. But it's like, how do we set the foundation for health and mental health and connection and relationship and all the positive things that we know are going to be able to outweigh the negative, right? Or adverse experiences. I mean, there's such a strong science for decades, even before the adverse childhood experiences study, right? There's evidence around like, well, kids have good things that happen and they have bad things that happen, and you want to tip the scales to positive outcomes, right? How do we do that when we recognize that not every person has sort of the same balance, right? The fulcrum
Yes.
changes depending
Yes.
on zip code or money or education or all of these sort of conditions, right? That's why the social and structural determinants of health are such a key part of this work, right? And of the prevention continuum.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And you know what I'm thinking about is like, and I get this in my work, so I'm sure you do too. Like, why should people care when we're talking about maybe a child and then looking at that child's family? Why and how does that impact the greater society? Because we know it does, but I don't know that everybody knows it does. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, it's such a great question, Ginger, and it absolutely does. The research is so clear that, first of all, my children will do better if all of our children are doing better.
Yes.
That's just documented, right? It also, we see at a population level, so not for one particular kid or family and their ACE score, but as we look at population level data, we know that if a population has high ACEs, the risk for mental health problems, physical health problems, life potential, all of those things are impacted at a population level. So it makes it where my health and well-being relies on yours, and likewise. I mean, I look at this, I think we can learn from COVID, because I think it was the first time that many people who don't study public health saw public health in action, right?
Yes.
If I wore my mask, right, I could help curb the spread of coronavirus to my neighbors. If I didn't wear my mask, it makes it more likely that my neighbors could catch what I have, right? It's the same kind of thing. It's like, how do we put in protective factors, loving relationships, warmth, support at every level in a community, right? When we do all of those things, jobs, access to health care, child care, all of these things are taking the edge off of our families, of our communities, and putting them on the road to thriving at a higher level than when there's all of this disinvestment in communities. There's not access to all the things that families need. So the way I like to operationalize it is that the work of prevention is making sure families have what they need when they need it, delivered in their own communities with love and trust and respect, without stigma, and to do that before families are in crisis. This is how you operationalize, or I operationalize, prevention. And when we do that, we all benefit, right? When we all have what we need, what does that look like? It looks like hope. It looks like joy. It looks like laughter, thriving, healing, right? Innovating. Like the things that we do today set the trajectory for not only lifelong health and well-being, but for intergenerational thriving, right? The babies today, their brains are developing.
Yes.
These are our innovators of tomorrow, our leaders, right? So we want to get that start as right as we can. It doesn't mean that, once you have a misstep, you can't change outcome. Of course you can, right? Early and often we need these protective factors across the lifespan. But prevention, like, it's possible early, and that's the work that
That's
really
the
I
work.
prioritize. That's the work.
Yeah.
Did that answer your question? It was long-winded.
No, it was beautiful. It wrapped it up in this bow. And I hope we're not too far into, maybe back up just a second for listeners. I hope all of our listeners are aware of what an ACE is, an adversity in childhood, something that happens to a child while their brain is developing that impacts them throughout their lifetime if not addressed, right? That it's not a diagnosis or a death sentence, but this prevention, it just is so important to, because the more adversities in childhood, the higher a child is at risk for what you said, mental, emotional, physical challenges in their lifetime.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's so exciting about a lot of sort of the more contemporary recent ACE studies and also positive childhood experiences studies is that we see that ACEs are not deterministic, as you said, Ginger.
Deterministic. Yeah.
They're not deterministic. Yes, as they accumulate, they make it more likely that you can have these negative health and life outcomes. And yet, this newer research shows that if you have a lot of these positive things, though, across domains, it can really outweigh the risk that's conferred by the adversity, right? So it's important that we think of it together, right? It's not just that these bad things set you off doom and gloom. No, right? And we know from individual stories of healing and thriving that many people even, think that those early, even adverse experiences make them who they are and help them develop their grit and their perseverance. And all of that is true, right? But at a population level, we want less adversity and we want more of this positivity and more of these protective factors and conditions, so that we can all realize, again, thriving, hope, resilience,
Yeah,
love.
we can gain grit and perseverance and all that without being hurt.
Correct. That's right.
We need trauma to make us better. We
That's
can
right.
prevent this. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's right.
Exactly. Well, and I'm excited to dig into a little bit more about what those protective factors are, and then even talk about what the challenges are right now in our society of, of getting this positive and protective factor message out there. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to ask Dr. Merrick those questions.
Hi, folks. Ginger and Julie here, and we want to tell you about our upcoming virtual conference in February called the Learning Brain Exchange. This will be a Creating Trauma-Sensitive Schools conference with high-quality, trauma-informed, resilience-focused information you've come to expect. But the Learning Brain Exchange will be focused on the science of learning from a cognitive, regulation, and relationship standpoint.
The Learning Brain Exchange is designed for all educators, from the building administrators and central office folks to curriculum developers to classroom teachers, and of course the counselors, social workers, and behavioral support teams. There's really something for all of us at the Learning Brain Exchange.
Registration opens soon, and early bird pricing continues through December 15th. Access to all 40 workshops plus our keynotes will be available for 60 days beyond the conference.
So come join us as we explore the topics from the science of reading to trauma responsive leadership to building compassionate school communities. It's all going to be there in the Learning Brain Exchange.
Find out more on our website,
attachtrauma.org. Okay, everybody, we're back with Dr. Melissa Merrick from the PCA America, and we're talking about childhood adversity prevention and how to get out in front of this in a very public health society way. We've been talking around about the protective factors and the positive childhood experiences, and we'd love for you to dig in a little bit with us, Melissa, on exactly what those are. Give us some examples, or talk to us about that.
Sure. I think just like the adverse childhood experiences study, or ACEs, studied 10 types of adversities and did all of this research on how those affect your health and well-being. And yet we know those are not the entire universe of early adversity that
Mhm.
children and families are experiencing, especially at this time, right? I sometimes feel like being alive in this moment and parenting in this moment can feel heavy and like an
Mhm.
adversity in and of itself, right? So similarly, there are these different protective factors frameworks, right? There's CSSP has a framework, and Essentials for Childhood talks about safe, stable, nurturing relationships and environments. I will just, in plain language, say I'm talking about the good stuff. I'm
Yeah.
talking about warmth and relationships and connections, social support. And at a population level, I'm talking about good policies that actually keep families strong and sturdy and able to release some of that overload of stress, right? So here I'm talking about things like childcare, paid
Mhm.
family leave, tax credits, like these things that actually have strong evidence of preventing child abuse and neglect, right? And
Yeah.
why? Because they decrease parental stress. So we're talking about anything that can help you navigate parenthood in a healthy way, that can help you access your good executive functioning, right? That you can only really access when you're calm and you can take a deep breath, right? Taking deep breaths, like these individual things can be protective too.
Yeah.
So it's a range of things. I'm talking about good stuff, right? Versus bad stuff. And we want more good stuff than bad stuff early and often throughout parenting and throughout early childhood, because when you have more of that good stuff, you can be on a path to thriving, right? So I just I don't want to get bogged down personally on whose protective factors framework you use and what
Right.
are the key ones. That's going to vary. It's really about how do we help people be connected, right, to their
Mhm.
communities, to people. I would say I tell this story, and I think it's a really important illustration. I've always been a working mom, right? I'm lucky that I've always had jobs that paid me. I'm married to a man who always was employed, and he's a lawyer and made a lot of money. And, our kids were in childcare. So in some ways, and I have like I said, a PhD in child clinical psychology. We know a little bit about this parenting stuff. And we're stressed out every day as parents, right?
Mhm.
But one of the key things as a working mom, I just remember vivid memories navigating Atlanta traffic, and I would be late, and what I had that other families didn't have is I had another mom's phone number where I could call and
Mhm.
say, oh my gosh, I'm in traffic. Can you stay with Lily and Ezra because the daycare is going to close, And they
Mhm.
would do it. And what did they have? They had my phone number. So then there were days that I could pitch in, right? That was protective for my
Mhm.
family.
Yeah.
That's protective. That is a protective factor that kept my family strong, that some families frankly don't have. They
Yeah.
don't have that sense of social support or someone that they can rely on in the case of a domino falling, right? And we know when one domino falls, whoa, it's more likely that all of these are going to fall until we're able to, stand one up. So I think this, demystifying that it doesn't have to be, there's no such thing as a perfect parent ever,
Mhm.
no matter
Right.
what degree you have, how much money you have, whatever, right? And yet we know there are things that that likely influence stress being high and increase risk for all sorts of violence or bad outcomes, right? So we in the business of prevention are just trying to, what are the things that, again, families need that can help them stay strong and withstand the stressors that are going to come.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So important and a great example of, that feels kind of simple and minor, but you're right. If that domino had fallen for you, there would have been so
Mhm.
much more stress and adversity that happened there. That's,
Well, and if you
yeah.
think of our current systems, right, it is often something that simple. So a parent being late to pick up
Yes.
their kids that can trigger that phone call to child welfare, right? And good
Right.
meaning, and we won't get
Right.
into today mandatory reporting and all this other stuff that
Yes.
makes it more complex. But the point is that it could have quickly turned a different way, right?
Yes. Yes.
Versus like you have something simple, a simple like lifeline, that you can tap into. And
Mhm.
so it's what are all those lifelines for all kinds of
Yeah.
families that we need to nurture and create and develop in
Yes.
neighborhoods that keep families strong and supported.
I was thinking about that as you were talking, and thinking about all the neighborhood connections, all the faith-based connections, all the, extended family connections that even from my generation to the present are much different societally than they used to be, and absent in so many ways for so many young families. And it's like, oh, that's a danger out there. And it's something, it's a challenge to figure out how to help build that, right? I mean, it's a challenge to put back into society efforts through policies or otherwise, through awareness or education, that those things, isn't it? I mean, that's a lot of your work right there, isn't it?
A lot of my work. How do we build formal and informal supports, right? How
Mm-hmm.
do we create an ecosystem around families that's going to keep them well and thriving, right? We have this co-designed, co-developed blueprint for family well-being. There are over 1,700 people that contributed to it. The North Star is that all children and families are living a happy and purposeful life with hope for the future, right? And so if that's a collective North Star, that means that there is a role for each and every one of us, each and every sector, each and every discipline in this work of keeping families strong, right? And so there are lots of examples of small things in your everyday life that really make a difference for families.
Right. Right. Well, let's shift for just a second and talk specifically to the educators who are listening in. Maybe talk about what their role is in all of that. How can they help with the prevention and the creation of the positive families here?
Oh yeah, well, educators play a huge role, right? We are indebted to our educators and teachers, and anybody that works in a school touches children and families and can make such a big difference, right? And I know that we focus sometimes on educators like knowing the signs of abuse and early identification and getting families the supports that they may need. I'm not going to talk about that part. I'm going to talk about the part of how do we keep families strong, right? Educators have a role in that. They see children each and every day. They understand a little bit about the conditions of their neighborhood, right? Because they live often in the same neighborhoods, right? They understand the challenges, but they also understand the resources and the opportunities, right? So their place in connecting families and children with opportunities to me is like amazing and critical. And yet we try for our educators to do so many things. So there are so
Yes.
many programs, so many, lessons and other things. But I'm talking about in the simple relational way, right? Seeing children like and their eyes lighting up when they see kids can be so protective for kids, right?
Yes.
Recognizing if a kid has a new haircut or a cool jacket or something. These little tiny moments. I know Bruce Perry talks about this a lot. It's like
Yes.
it's in those tiny moments, right?
Yes.
Where
Yeah.
your brain is being regulated and you're able
Dosing.
to
That
feel affirmed.
microdosing. Yeah.
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 Yeah, I love that. And so to me, educators make such a huge part of any kind of a prevention
They
ecosystem, right?
are.
And I think that this field too is turning from and this is not a debate on whether there should be mandatory reporting or not, but this is about this reframing to mandatory support. I kind of like
Oh,
this
good.
framing around the country because it's showing that like we all have a role to play in keeping
Yes.
families strong, right? And so this idea of all the little ways that educators are supporting families matters, right? And so
Yes.
they should feel really affirmed that they're a critical piece of helping children thrive.
Yes.
So good. Yep. And creating that safe space and noticing,
Yeah.
being attuned to these kids and how else do you know what resources to give and to support? So,
Yeah.
and I know we're talking about educators, but I also want to make space here I love your home visiting program, Malia, who that I also met when I was with you. She's very much involved in that, right? And as a child abuse investigator years and years and years ago at the early point of my career, things have changed so much. And this home visit idea to me is brilliant. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah. Home visiting is such an interesting kind of an intervention or resource because I think most people don't even know what home visiting is, right?
Right.
And home visiting, the way that I'm talking about it, and home visiting parent programs like ours, Healthy Families America, they are free, voluntary programs. They are not, you're not a bad parent and you're made to go to a program, any of that stigma is not associated with these. These are free offerings on the birth or adoption of a child. It could be your first child, your 10th child, right? We know that we're always new parents every time we have a new baby.
Yes.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
these programs allow for us to help families navigate new parenthood, right? So it really meets parents where they are, and it helps them. They are the experts in their own families, right? So it just helps affirm them and see them. And so many people talk about their home visitor as if they're like a family member. We call our home visitors family support specialists because they are just really about helping that family thrive. But to hear families talk about the home visitor, it's like, I never had a person who just didn't judge me and could just support me, could answer my questions without making me feel like I was, dumb or uninformed and making me feel like I'm in this together with someone, right? It's a really strong, and it has evidence over the past 30 years of our model of reducing child abuse and neglect by a third, helping support maternal health and reproductive health, and just all good stuff. And ours is one of the most widely implemented home visiting programs. Like I said, it's in 600 sites. That's across
Amazing.
38 states, DC, and the 5 territories. There's about 70,000 families in the program each year. And we've been able to reach over 1 million families since the beginning of the program.
That's
It
amazing.
there's we had Carrie Sipp on our podcast, and we had Deb McNellis, who was a speaker at our recent conference. And both of those women are deeply passionate about early intervention, even like as early as the first 60 days
Yes.
of, and how that brain is like so important. And so we're talking about this baby here and getting in there early and surrounding this mom,
Yes.
Mhm.
because
Support. Yes.
that mom is that baby
Yes.
or
Yeah.
there's, and so what you're talking about so beautifully aligns with that the earlier we get in there, the more prevention we can do and how we can shape that future for
Absolutely.
that family.
Yeah. And I would say what's also really compelling is like for our home visiting model, some moms are even enrolled in the model prenatally. And it's been
Yes. Mm.
beautiful to hear, think about it. Stress is not great for our uterine
No.
environment and
Yes.
such, and is not associated with good birthing outcomes, right? So the
Right.
Yeah.
fact that you can support a mom even as she's, in her 3rd trimester and preparing to be a mom, sometimes a single mom or a young mom, right? Whatever it is, but providing that support can also make that transition a lot easier as well.
Yeah, I don't think we can talk about prevention without talking about how stress hormones
Yes,
cross the placental barrier,
that's right.
Right.
how alcohol crosses the placental barrier, drug use. There
Yep,
are so many things that in utero impact that baby's brain and nervous system
Right.
development. So
Right.
absolutely.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really profound. And the thing sort of back to the educator comment that's also similar here is what the research also shows is that when you have a strong and sturdy, trusted relationship with an adult,
Mhm.
right, it can sometimes be the proxy for that lack of safe, stable, nurturing relationship and
Yes.
environment other
Right.
places,
Yeah.
right? So educators can do that for kids that maybe their home life is more intense and
Mhm.
there's more struggles, right? A
Mhm.
home visitor can do that for a new parent who maybe is not surrounded by extended family. To Julie's point, generationally, we've come
Yes.
away from
Yes.
living close to our whole families and are
Yes.
on the same block, and the whole village is supporting us. Often
Mhm.
we're living places where we don't know anybody, right? Or we're
Right.
having to develop new friends who are family and such. So these trusted adults who are going to support you, align with you, they're not going to, judge you or tell you
Yes.
what to do in this negative way, but instead be along for this journey to help see you thrive. It can be really, really impactful. And the evidence shows that it can really, again, be that proxy for not having those other relationships. So it's a
Mhm.
key prevention pillar.
Oh, beautifully said.
And I want to pull out one thing that you said earlier as we talked, and maybe shine a spotlight on this, because I think the research backs this too. And it's like when this support that's given to move towards more of a positive, more of a prevention of things happens, it has intergenerational positive consequences. Like it sets that child and that family on a positive trajectory that happens, that changes things for generation to generation. And
Absolutely.
so, I mean, that's good for all of us. I mean,
Yeah.
if I'm an employer of adults that have had good nurturing, then they're gonna be good workers for me, and they're going to also be better parents than they probably could have been if they hadn't had that, right? And so
Right.
that
And they're going to be better parents to your future workforce as an
exactly,
employer, right?
exactly,
So it
exactly.
does have cross-generational impacts. And that's why a lot of our interventions have to take this cross-generational or multi
Mm-hmm.
generational approach too, right? It's not enough to work with children if you're not also working with the family. And
Exactly.
likewise, if a family is embedded in a community that doesn't have what the community needs,
Right.
right, it's not going to be as effective. So we're talking about multi-layer, multi-generational
Yes.
prevention efforts that have really the potential to make great impact across domain.
Exactly. So that leads me to what I think will probably kind of be a wrap up. I'd like you to answer both sides of the same coin, in terms of it both excites me to hear all of that, and it also sort of overwhelms me because we're talking about a big job, right? So what do you think is the biggest challenge? Like, what keeps you up at night? And then also, where do you see the biggest hope?
It does keep me up at night. I would say the biggest challenge in this moment are just all of the stressors, right? With when you look at the federal disinvestments in some of
Mm-hmm.
our social safety
Yes.
net programs, we look at just the fear in community of
Mm-hmm.
families being deported and maybe being
Yes.
deported without their children. And
Yes.
so even if it doesn't affect your family directly, if that's happening in your community,
Mm-hmm.
stress is high, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what's our number one risk factor for child abuse and neglect is
Sure.
parental stress,
Yeah.
right? So without that balance, but the great hope is
Mm-hmm.
we have the balances, right? We know what works to keep families strong and thriving. We know we need connections. We know we need social support. We know we need economic and concrete supports, right, to meet families' needs, right? Families need food and housing and jobs, and right. So like we also, it's not like, oh wow, there's all this stress, but we don't know what to do about it. In fact, we do know what to do about it. And to me, that brings me a lot of hope that prevention happens in partnership. It happens at partnership across sector. It happens with families at the center, and it happens across domain, right? Across discipline, across this prevention continuum. So what makes it less overwhelming for me is that it doesn't mean I or my organization or my discipline is doing all of this. It means that
Mm-hmm.
each of us is doing the piece that we are experts or that we know to do. We are influencing our spheres of influence, right? And like listening to families, integrating that lived experience and lived expertise into our co-designed solutions, but bringing that all together, all that good stuff, it's going to help us meet this moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we have to. It's our
We have
responsibility.
to.
We have to. There's no just being like, oh, it's too hard, we can't do it. We have to,
We have
for our
to.
own families and for everyone's family.
No.
Yeah, and
Thank you.
it doesn't have to be this huge, overwhelming, fix the world by yourself. That would make me go, I can't.
Yeah.
But you have given us some very concrete ways of just do your part and do it together,
Yes.
creating that and one step at a time so
Yeah.
that you're not overwhelmed.
Yeah. We need to be able to access the good thinking parts of our brains. So we need to also have some levity and joy and
Yes.
laughter in this time. But really, this is a moment where we need to work together and work differently, right? It's not enough to just do things better. We have to do some better things in this moment.
Yes, I agree. I agree.
Yeah, there
I
is a
love that.
call. You've given us this call, and I feel it deeply, and change is possible.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. In partnership with all of you. What a great
Yes.
conversation.
Yeah. Awesome. No, yeah. You've left me with the hope because I was feeling overwhelmed there for a hot second about, there's no way we could change the whole world, but we have to change the world where we are, right?
Yeah.
We have to change it from our own
Correct.
thought. So yeah, and do it together. I love it. I love it. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Merrick, for that, for what you do, for how you follow the universe's lead to where you're supposed to be, and given the
For
rest of
opening.
us a call to do that too, right?
Yeah.
So we appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Okay. And we thank you to listeners, knowing that you're not only listeners, but you're out there thinking about what you can do for your children and the children that you love and care for and the community that you love and care for. So thank you all for that as well. And we'll catch you in the next episode.
That's a wrap for today's episode of Regulated and Relational. In our next episode, Julie and Ginger talk about the power of play for healing and connection. A special thanks to Joe Kramer for donating the music. To learn more about the Attachment and Trauma Network, visit us at www.attachtrauma.org. I'm Lauren Cassis, and as always, thank you for listening.